In this video, we're going to talk about share buybacks, why the government wants to tax them, and why investors like Warren Buffett don't believe they should be taxed. Alright, stock buybacks, otherwise known as share repurchases, is when a company goes in the open market and buys its stock back at fair value. Now, why would the company do this? Well, the idea is, as it reduces the number of shares outstanding, it'll increase the value of each remaining share. Let's say we have a company that earns $100 in earnings, and we've got 10 shares outstanding. Therefore, our earnings per share is $10. Now, let's say we go out, we buy back a share, so we have 9 shares outstanding. If we earn that same $100 in the next quarter, our earnings per share will increase, and thus the value of that share should increase because the earnings allocated to it is more. Now, this seems awesome. If we're an investor, of course, we want management to do everything they can to increase the value of our shares. And this works a lot of the times, especially in the short term. Take Meta, for example. Earlier this year, they announced a massive stock repurchase program, and by the end of the week, their stock was up about 20%. So why does the government want to tax them? Well, a lot of critics say that they don't actually increase the productivity or the efficiency of the business. They just inflate the earnings on paper, and they condense the ownership of the company to fewer and larger investors. And in fact, for most of the 1900s, stock buybacks weren't allowed. They were considered stock manipulation. See, if you're buying back shares, that means you have extra cash lying around, whether it's from raising debt or it's from leftover earnings from the previous quarter or year. And companies can do other things with that cash besides doing buybacks. They can complete an acquisition, they can invest in an R&D project, more marketing, capital expenditures, etc. So why wouldn't a company just do this? Why would it do buybacks? Well, that depends on who you're talking about and who you're asking. Let's take Buffett, for example. In 2021, they bought back $27 billion worth of Berkshire stock. And why they do this? Well, they said that there's no external opportunities, right? They felt like everything was overvalued and that there was no place for them to put their money. So they bought back shares to give investors some boost in value. Now, Buffett is considered an amazing capital allocator, and he has a great track record of caring for shareholder value, but there's critics who would say that might be an outlier. See, if you're a CEO or a chairman or another executive at a company, you get a cash-based salary, whether it's a few $100,000 or $1 million a year, and then you get a massive stock package. And so if you're the CEO of a company, and you've got a decision to make with your extra cash, you invest it in an R&D project or an acquisition. Nothing could come of the R&D project, or the acquisition could come south. And if you're a manager, if you start investing in things that don't work, you could get fired. Or you could buy back shares. The stock price will likely rise in the short term. Shareholders will probably be fairly happy, and you're most likely not going to get fired, not at least right away. So the decision is a bit of a conundrum. Take Bed Bath & Beyond, for example. The company's teetering on bankruptcy right now because of a massive share repurchase program. 2020, they announced a turnaround program, and part of that, they're going to buy back about $650 million worth of stock over the next few years. Now, at the time, the company had about $1.5 billion in cash and about $1.2 billion in debt. So it had the cash to do it, but they kind of changed the plans, and by the end of 2021, they had bought back $1 billion worth of shares. Now, I'm not a CEO, I'm not a business guru or anything, but if I've got $1.5 billion in cash, $1.2 billion in debt, and in 2021, when economic uncertainty was starting to rise, I don't know if I'm going to spend a vast majority of my cash on something that doesn't help our core business, especially since the case for buybacks is that they boost shareholder value, and now Bed Bath & Beyond stock is about $1.50, which I wouldn't consider a boost in shareholder value. And to top it all off, they just had to raise about $1 billion to avoid bankruptcy, which is ironically the same amount of money that they spent on buybacks that put them in this position. And it's not just Bed Bath & Beyond. Airlines received a lot of criticism. They needed a $54 billion bailout in 2020 due to COVID, and in the few years leading up to it, they had spent about $40 billion on stock buybacks. Now, you can't expect someone to predict a global pandemic, but it doesn't look good when you're asking for $54 billion from the public when you just spent tens of billions of dollars on something that didn't help your core business. So why do investors like Buffett say that they shouldn't be taxed? Well, in his most recent annual letter, Buffett said, "The math isn't complicated. As the number of outstanding shares goes down, your interest in our underlying businesses goes up," which is the argument for buybacks. He also called critics who say that all purchases are harmful to the country or to shareholders, or that they're just particularly beneficial to CEOs or either economic illiterate or silver-tongued demagogues. And yes, I had to look up what demagogues means. It means a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than rational arguments. So essentially, he's saying, look, buybacks aren't the problem. It's some management that's the problem and that uses them improperly. And the people who want to tax them are just kind of lumping everybody together and saying, look, buybacks are the issue. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. If you own a company and they announce a big buyback program, are you happy? Would you rather them use the money for something else? Yeah, thanks for watching. I'm going to have 2 videos coming out a week, kind of like this style. So if you guys like them, please let me know and leave any comments. Thanks.